even though Bernie doesn't have the power of a Stalin or a Mao, right? His tendencies are still the same. It is immediate uncomfortability at facts and figures that don't align with your prevailing narrative. And then it's immediately attack the messenger rather than self-reflection. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's see what we could have done wrong. Maybe we can tweak the incentives a little bit so this doesn't happen. No, it's challenge. It's shoot the messenger first and ask questions later. With that being said, we are now moving on to the Epstein segment where we have Bernie Sanders appearing recently on Bill Maher, and they were discussing.
Why'd you say it so weird?
I always just Maher. I always mess up his name.
What did I say? Weird. He's Maher.
Bro, I was like, did your voice just do auto-tune?
Maher. You went Maher.
You auto-tuned your voice. That was impressive.
Thank you.
Maher. Bill Maher.
Bill Maher.
Bill Maher. Okay.
Just
if you say it quick, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
If you try to
just get through it.
It's always throwing me off like that.
That's how I pursue my sex life. Just get through it. They won't know you're bad if you just get through it.
So anyway, Senator Sanders was on Bill Maher recently, and they were talking student loan forgiveness. And Bill, I gotta say, listen, Bill, for me personally, is somebody that reiterates the point that nobody, I want to know if I can say this. Almost everybody is not beyond the point of no return. They can always come back. And what I mean by that is like most of Bill Maher's career, I would, and probably still to this day, we would disagree on probably 90% of policies and things like that. But I really got to say that Bill Maher has turned a corner in the sense that he is, despite his left leanings, and I'm sure he would still consider himself a Democrat, a leftist, whatever, on certain issues, and this being one of them, he is much, much more inclined to let logic and reason not blind him, or he doesn't let his ideology blind him to logic and reason. And so kudos to him. I can still applaud him, and again, that's not to say that what I think about everything is always right all the time. I'm just saying that somebody who I, until a few years ago, had despised, giving him a second chance because, he's proving to be somebody who's capable of critical thought and stepping outside of the push to always say and do the right thing, right? The cancel mob and stuff like that. So kudos to Bill, and especially on this point of pushing back on Bernie Sanders' student loan forgiveness program.
Well, it seems to think, and then again, to harken on to your, kudos for Bill, it seems to be like Bill, Joey Rogues, a bunch of other ones that they've tried to cancel in the past. Louis C.K.
I mean, Elon considered himself left of center until they started attacking him.
Perfect. And he's like, I didn't switch to conservative. You guys just moved so far away from me that I stayed in the same part and then became right wing. I
now appear conservative by comparison.
Yeah. But and that's the thing is that it's funny when people in the entertainment industry that become bigger than the entertainment industry, they don't have to toe the party line.
Yeah.
When they can actually say the things that we're all thinking, they'll say it. But the people that don't, that come out and keep toting that party line, I want to get that next movie, I want to get that next role, they're always the ones that are telling you that, hey, if you vote red, you guys want a civil war. You guys didn't get the vaccine, you uneducated fucks. Like, that's, I mean, again, it's just so clear. It's that when the people can actually say what they want to, they don't lose the plot. They don't lose touch with reality. But when they have to kowtow, they'll say whatever they have to get that next starring role. Brie Larson, she almost talked herself out of Mrs. Marvel. I'm not going to call it Captain Marvel. It's Mrs. Marvel. But she said, we need more diversity in the MCU universe. Like, perfect. Let's start with your role. And then
yeah,
all of a sudden, they start backing up when you start holding them with their feet to the fire of what they say. So I don't know. It's just food for thought.
So anyway, the most recent entry into the Bill Maher, speaking reason to insanity, Like I said, he had Bernie Sanders on and they were talking about the student loan forgiveness. And Bill, which I'm going to play for you here in a second, it's about a 35 second clip. Bill reads off to Bernie some statistics from a poll of the people who would be the beneficiaries of student loan forgiveness and what they would do with that money. And as Nameless Faceless Guy puts the video up next to me, for those of you who are viewers instead of listeners, you'll be able to see Bernie's body language before you hear his response to what Bill has to say. And it is really, really telling. Not only Bernie's body language, but also what his response is. And we'll talk about that on the other side of the clip. So with that being said, let's play the clip. It's, like I said, 35 seconds. And here we go. We start out with Bill talking and then Bernie jumps in. Sorry, I had it on mute.
Technical difficulties.
This is show authenticity.
But please stay tuned.
Okay, so I just want to read you this. And again, this is against why people sometimes, I think, question some of what you're saying. This is a survey, student loan forgiveness recipients. 73% of applicants say they are likely to spend their extra money on non-essential, including vacations, smartphone, drugs, and alcohol. They admitted that to the pollster.
Who is this pollster?
NBC News. 52% they are very likely to buy new clothing. 46% they would use the money for vacation and eat out at restaurants.
So, as you can see, or as you did see in the video, as Bill is reading these statistics, you can see Bernie start to squirm. I'm doing the play-by. I know you saw it, viewers, but doing the play-by-play for the listeners. Bernie's starting to squirm a little bit, right? Because these numbers are not comfortable for him. Because again, when somebody like Bernie, when any politician with power says, I'm going to do policy X, I haven't looked 2 steps in front of my nose about what potential negative, unintended consequences might come from my policy. I'm not going to engage in that analysis because human beings are angels, and I have assumed the best about human beings, and that's why anybody who disagrees with my policies is probably evil and hates human beings, right? That's sort of the paradigm that they create when they talk about these type of things, that it's all positive outcomes and there's no unintended consequences, whatever. So when Bernie hears something that would go against the all rainbows and fairies and unicorns outcome of his student loan forgiveness policies, he's visibly uncomfortable, right? He's squirming in his chair. And then, rather than engaging with the data, the first thing that pops into his mind to do, the very first thing, is challenge the source, challenge whoever's saying it, right? And don't get me wrong, there is always an opportunity and there is always room in any discussion for challenging the source, but that's not the first place you go with it. But again, that's what he has, because again, people in the Bernie Sanders mold, right? Everything they want to do is only always ever for good, benevolent motivations and reasons, right? So if there's anything bad that comes out of that, it's not because their policy was bad, don't you see? It's because that there wasn't sufficient, buy-in by the people. The people didn't do it right. This is why totalitarian regimes like the Soviet Union or, the Great Leap Forward in China, this is why they always end in mass death. Because when things go ass-shaped from the grand designer's policy perspective, it's never my policy was bunk. It's always the people didn't buy into the policy sufficiently enough. They weren't true believers like me. I'm not going to apologize. They need to be, culled from society in very literal instances. And so, even though Bernie doesn't have the power of a Stalin or a Mao, right? His tendencies are still the same. It is immediate uncomfortability at facts and figures that don't align with your prevailing narrative. And then it's immediately attack the messenger rather than self-reflection. Let's go back to the drawing board. Let's see what we could have done wrong. Maybe we can tweak the incentives a little bit so this doesn't happen. No, it's challenge, it's shoot the messenger first and ask questions later. So that's Bernie is just the most recent iteration in a long line dating back to tyrants from time immemorial.
Well, what's the first thing that you always get when you challenge a socialist or a communist that's pushing for a new communistic country or for us to go more socialist? What's the first thing they always say when you challenge them on their stance? It's that, well, it's never been done right. It's like, yeah, no shit. Like that it can't be done right because the people that run the thing that you think is utopia are, what's that word again? Human. And they are privy to all the subtle, wants, greed, power, success, ruling class. These people belong to me and they have to do what I tell them. So that's a problem. And then for the rest of us that get caught in those societies going, well, who could have seen this coming? Oh, all the people that were silenced. And by silenced, I mean they were thrown into a train. They were thrown into a camp.
Lined up in front of ditches.
They were, or nowadays, the current version of that is just canceling them. To where they can't get a job. And then what they're doing in China with their social currency, digital social currency, they'll just press a button, shut everything off. You can't buy food, you can't buy this, can't buy that. You might as well shoot them in the goddamn head, but it doesn't cost the bullet. So again, I don't know when it became a problem in this country to have differing viewpoints and to argue those viewpoints out as adults, as intelligent beings. But what it's devolved into is whenever I hear something I don't like, I ask you what your source was. Because Bernie's not alone. That's what happens every time. You could say, well, I loved Obama, and I think that President Trump is the worst president we've ever had. I was like, well, did you know Obama killed a lot of innocent people? It's like, what? It's like, yeah, Obama had the most drone strikes ever. It's like, well, where did you get that information? It's like,
much to Bill Maher's credit, from NBC News.
Right.
From your sources?
You guys. What's the Candace Owen? No, the Republican lady that's always snapping back at these people. She did that with the New York Post.
I mean, it might be Candace. I don't know.
I think is it Owens or
Candace Owens? Yeah.
Is she the black lady that's always standing up and talking back against this?
The Blexit
so basically, she comes
like
out and she says I forgot the story, and we can cut this out if you want. But she got into a fight literally on social media with the New York Times, going. The New York Times challenged her. And she said, where did you get this information? She goes, you guys. And then just put all the articles that the New York Post had posted about this particular subject. It's like, well, you never take accountability. And the thing is, again, and to go back to your point, they're never accountable. They're never accountable for any of the bad policies that we were all saying were bad back then. And they all shouted us down, called us racist, anti-Semitic. What any Nazis? MAGA is now closer to Nazi than, Make America Great Again.
According to Bryan Cranston,
Yeah, which may or may not find its way into an episode.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's just, I'm at a loss for words. We need to start talking again in this country. And even if you voted for Trump and even if you voted for Biden, you should still be able to have a conversation. That's all I'm saying.
Well, and just before we move on, David's point about the Bernie Sanders of the world always trying to build utopia. I always laugh at that sort of critique to libertarians, right? Is they say, well, sure, you can have your free market, free voluntary society if human beings were angels, because then you don't need government to regulate everybody because everybody would do the right thing and blah, blah, blah. And I always just throw that back at them and say, who's really more utopian here? You are saying that a select few people, a handful of people, and by all, measures of math, 535 members of Congress, 1 president, and 9 Supreme Court justices is not very many people to dictate all of the rules for 330 million of us. And you want to allocate as much power in that few hands and expect them to not be corrupted? Who has the true view of humanity in mind, right? Are they cut from a different cloth than the rest of us that somehow makes them immune to being corrupted? Are they somehow wiser than 330 million of us pursuing our own interests where we are experts on our own lives much more than they could ever be?
The numbers may surprise you.
Right? It's incredibly utopian to think that a few managers over literally millions, or if you want to take it out to the global context, talking about the World Economic Forum, managing billions of unique human lives with their own interests and talents and access to resources and everything else like that, that a select handful of people could even manage all of that if they were perfect angels, and B, more realistically, not be completely corrupted because they're fallible humans just like the rest of us, which is truly more utopian. Right? Our view is that human beings are not solely good or solely evil, but that they respond to incentives. And that the things that you put in front of them, and generally speaking, most human beings are going to do whatever they perceive to be in their best interest. Sometimes that manifests in greed. And sometimes that manifests in all kinds of negative outcomes that, you know, human action takes or that takes place given, you know, a certain set of facts and incentives. But I would rather have that messy, chaotic, you know, situation where human beings are allowed to pursue their own interests because the incentives can often align to where them pursuing their own incentives are actually has these positive externalities that help everybody else. Like in pursuit of profit, in order to gain more customers, I have to give them a satisfactory customer experience. I have to in some way make their lives marginally better so that they choose to voluntarily give me their money. That's not utopian at all. That's just aligning the incentives into a direction that we want humanity to go, which is be of use to other human beings. And then once we're all of use to each other, we can work together towards larger goals that takes more of us to hopefully push the entire species forward. That's not utopian at all. That's reality. So I would suggest to you, if you have that, you know, accusation lobbed at you, or maybe you think it yourself, it's not the libertarians that are utopian. It's the Bernie Sanders of the world that are utopian, that they can just create any policy they want and it's only going to have good outcomes and not account for the fact that, yeah, college students are probably going to spend free money on beer, parties, and probably drugs. Shocker. They're not going to invest it and you know, buy their first property. Some might, but not all. And according to NBC, 73% said that they won't. So that's a pretty large chunk when you're talking about the government handing out trillions of dollars to people who didn't earn it.
Like I said before, it's trusting a college student to make a prudent decision when all he wants to do is get laid and get drunk.